Minister, thank you for being with us on the programme today. Is there anything from your perspective, anything at all in this budget?
Well, I did welcome the reversal of the national insurance hike, but I think when you look at the overall package of budgetary measures together, you can't but concede, and this has been, I think, verified by the Fiscal Institute, that the overall budget is good for people who earn in excess of £150,000, but does very, very little for anyone who earns less than that. And I think in any set of circumstances that would be unfair and unjustified, but in the particular circumstances that we face, with many families facing into crisis this winter, I think it is absolutely obscene that this is the type of budgetary measures that the Tory government have come up with. All we can actually do at the moment is try and distribute 95% of the budget that departments had last year. We can't spend any additional money. We can't undertake new initiatives. And that's because the DUP have refused to allow the executive to be set up. So there are things that we could do and would want to do if an executive was in place. Firstly, we would bring the budgets for the departments up to the full 100%. We would get the three-year budget agreed, and we would distribute that £270 million, as it now will be, that is sitting in the executive's coffers since early this year, that we haven't been able to touch and we haven't been able to apply to any assistance for those people who are needing support at this time. There is no denying that we have £270 million sitting which cannot be spent. There's no denying that the £400 per household scheme came to us first in February when the DUP brought the executive down. That money, I have no doubt, would be in a scheme now and would be begun to be distributed. What we're now trying to do with Treasury is work around the absence of an executive, because the DUP have prevented that from happening, and trying to get that £400 per household scheme out to people. There is no certainty as to when that will be delivered. We're also having to work with them in terms of that energy cap support for businesses here, an equivalent level of support for business here, to try and make sure that is distributed as well. All of that is placed in uncertainty because we haven't got an executive in place, and businesses and families here are concerned. I'm out every day meeting businesses. I did a session with older people during the week. They are genuinely concerned about what the winter holds for them. So for the DUP to be blasé and say an executive wouldn't make any difference, then why go into power sharing in the first place? Of course it would make a difference. We, during the COVID pandemic, were the channel for money that came from Westminster to get quickly onto the ground here where it was needed to support businesses and families and workers where that funding was needed, and we could be that conduit again. And the DUP need to stop spoofing around these things, brushing them off, and get back to that which they were elected to do, which was to work with the rest of us around an executive table.
I want to ask you about comments by the DUP MP Sammy Wilson on Talkback in the middle of last week. I think it was Wednesday, where he appeared to claim that that money has in fact been spent already dealing with deficits in other departments and is no longer available for this cost of living crisis. That's what I listened back to it, that's what he seemed to be suggesting. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, and I'm surprised how the DUP can go onto programmes and make these assertions and not get challenged by people. That's a complete and utter lie, and Sammy Wilson knows that. He was a finance minister himself. If we have budgets, money sitting in our accounts that comes across as apparent consequential from London, it cannot be spent unless an executive takes a decision to spend it. We don't have what we would have over the course of the year, monitoring rounds where departments aren't spending money, return it to the centre, and that's redistributed to departments that need it. We don't have any of that because we haven't got an executive to take those decisions. Sammy Wilson and other DUP members are fully aware of this, but they're prepared to go on to radio shows and television shows and tell lies to cover the fact that they're preventing an executive from sitting, that they're preventing
that's very strong language, I'm
the
sure.
money that they need, and preventing...
Okay. I know you feel strongly about it. I know he feels strongly. I just think the use of that kind of language is maybe not very helpful under the circumstances. You're rejecting it as an untruth. He was very clear, because he was asked about it repeatedly. He was very clear that what he was saying was absolutely correct. Now, I mean, you're just saying he's misguided. He's got it wrong. He doesn't understand the facts. Let's couch it in those terms, shall we?
No, I'm not saying that at all. No, well, I'm sorry, Mark, I'm not saying that at all. Sammy Wilson does know the facts. He is not misguided, and he is deliberately telling lies to people on the airways to try and hide the blushes of the DUP for the fact that they're preventing an executive being formed. He knows we can't distribute money. He knows we haven't been able to top up departments' money through monitoring rounds. He knows that we can't. Departments are in danger of overspending, which will impact on budgets next year because we can't redistribute money in the executive. He knows all of that, and he's telling it otherwise. I can't call it out for anything other than lies. Is that we would go back into the executive in the morning with the other parties to try and do the work that is necessary. In the absence of that, if the DUP continue to prevent an executive being formed, we will work with the departments in London to try and get as much certainty as quick a time frame for delivery on some of the supports that are coming through as possible. And we will argue in the case of the £100 heating oil per household here, as we have done. And I spoke to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury on Friday morning. I told him that was absolutely nowhere near what was needed. It would hardly fill the bottom of an oil tank for the average household here. And we will continue to argue in defence of people. And that's why we are out on the ground, myself and my other ministerial colleagues, meeting businesses, meeting families who are struggling, meeting charities who are working in this sector, meeting older people who are concerned about what lies ahead over the course of this winter, to try and give a sense of the issues that they're facing, some of the solutions that we can present to try and address these issues, and to continue to press the British Government to do what is necessary and what is right, not to give tax break for their wealthy friends, but to actually address the challenges that we face in the here and now with support for vulnerable and people, and for businesses and small businesses in particular, issues that they have failed to address in this budget. But if you look at the overall package, and it's not just us saying this, the Institute of Fiscal Studies have said the overall package benefits people who earn over £150,000 a year. I have to suggest that those people are not struggling or worried about what this winter will bring to them. But people who are on low income, people who are on benefits, people who are pensioners, they are the people who will really worry. And the overall package of support that has come to them is not sufficient to deal with the crisis that lies ahead. And of course we will continue to lobby for that. You understand, Mark, I'm at a caretaker minister capacity. I can take decisions in my department that affect only my department. I can continue on work that has already begun, but I can't take any new initiatives. I can't spend money. I can't propose the spending of money that's available to the executive. None of these things can happen because we don't have the authority to take decisions which cut across other departments. We can't receive money from departments that they're not spending and redistribute it across other departments to try and protect public services. None of this can happen because there isn't an executive in place. There are only caretaker ministers with very limited and restricted powers. OK, we need to leave it there. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, Minister. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.